A plane disappeared without any warning, without any distress signal, and without leaving behind a clear explanation that anyone could understand. It did not crash in front of witnesses, it did not explode in the sky, and it did not send out a final message asking for help. It simply vanished, as if something had quietly erased it from existence while no one was watching. 239 people were on board that aircraft, including passengers, crew members, and families whose lives were moving forward normally until that exact moment. And what makes this story even more disturbing is not just the disappearance itself, but what happened after contact was lost. Because the aircraft did not fall immediately, and it did not stop moving through the sky. It continued flying for hours, silently, steadily, without responding to any calls or signals from the outside world. Even today, years later, there is still no complete explanation that answers every question surrounding this event. Some people believe it was a tragic accident that unfolded in an unexpected way. Others believe it was a deliberate act carried out by someone on board. And then there are those who believe that whatever happened to that plane was never meant to be discovered or fully understood. And the most disturbing part is this: even today, no one knows what really happened inside that plane. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 prepared for departure just like any other routine international flight that had taken off countless times before. The airport environment was calm, the passengers moved through the boarding gates without concern, and the crew followed their standard procedures with quiet professionalism. There were no warnings, no unusual maintenance issues, and no visible signs that anything was about to go wrong. At exactly 12:41 a.m., the aircraft lifted off from Kuala Lumpur, climbing smoothly into the dark sky as it began its journey toward Beijing. Inside the cockpit, Captain Zahirieh Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Hamid were operating the aircraft in a controlled and familiar manner. Every action they took followed established protocols, and nothing about their behavior suggested any kind of emergency or instability. At 1:19 a.m., the final communication between the aircraft and air traffic control was recorded. The message was simple, calm, and completely routine. "Good night, Malaysian 370. There was no tension in the voice, no hesitation in the delivery, and no indication that anything unusual was about to occur. And yet, those words would become the last confirmed contact anyone would ever have with that aircraft. Just minutes after that final transmission, the aircraft disappeared from civilian radar systems in a way that initially did not seem immediately alarming. Temporary signal loss can occur in aviation for a variety of reasons, and at first, this situation appeared to be just another routine interruption. However, as time passed and communication could not be re-established, concern began to grow among those monitoring the flight. Military radar data later revealed a critical and deeply unsettling detail that changed the direction of the investigation entirely. The aircraft had turned around in a controlled and deliberate manner, completely reversing its original flight path. Instead of continuing toward Beijing, it flew back across Malaysia and continued moving northwest toward the Andaman Sea. This was not a random movement, and it did not match the behavior of an aircraft experiencing a simple technical malfunction. There was still no distress signal, no emergency communication, and no explanation for the sudden change in direction. The plane continued moving through the sky in silence, as if it had chosen to disappear from the world below. And that was the moment this case stopped being a disappearance and became something else. What investigators discovered next only deepened the mystery in a way that made the situation even more difficult to understand. Satellite data later confirmed that the aircraft continued flying for nearly 7 hours after it had vanished from radar systems. 7 full hours of flight, during which no communication was sent and no response was received from the cockpit. The aircraft followed a path that did not lead towards safety, and it did not attempt to land at any known airport along the way. Instead, it continued traveling farther and farther away from populated regions, heading deep into the southern Indian Ocean. This area is one of the most remote and least accessible regions on Earth, where visibility is limited and recovery efforts are extremely difficult. And somewhere above that vast and empty ocean, the aircraft continued its silent journey until it eventually disappeared once again. And no one was there to see it happen. This time, there were no additional signals, no further data, and no indication of what had happened in those final moments. Once it became clear that the aircraft was missing, a large-scale international search operation was launched in an effort to locate it. Multiple countries contributed resources, including ships, aircraft, and satellite systems designed to track any possible signals. Despite the scale of this effort, the search faced a significant challenge from the very beginning. No one knew the exact location of the aircraft, and the available data only provided limited clues about its possible path. The search area covered thousands of kilometers of open ocean, making it one of the most difficult recovery missions ever attempted. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. But no confirmed crash site was found. But even with all of that effort, nothing was found. Not a signal, not a wreckage, not even a clear direction. There was no large debris field, no clear evidence of impact, and no indication of where the aircraft had ultimately ended up. It was as if the plane had vanished completely, leaving behind only uncertainty and unanswered questions. More than a year after the disappearance, a piece of debris was discovered on a remote island in the Indian Ocean. This fragment was later confirmed to be part of the aircraft, providing the first physical evidence connected to MH370. For the first time, there was proof that the plane did not just disappear, it ended somewhere. But where was still unknown. It was real. This was no longer just a mystery. Over time, additional pieces of debris were found along distant coastlines, carried by ocean currents across vast distances. However, these discoveries did not provide clear answers about what had happened to the aircraft. Instead, they introduced new questions about the nature of the crash and the location of the main wreckage. The debris was scattered in a way that did not match typical aviation accidents, where wreckage is usually concentrated near a single crash site. The absence of a central wreckage location made it even more difficult to determine what had actually occurred. As time passed and no clear answers were found, more and more theories began to emerge from investigators, analysts, and people around the world who were trying to understand what had happened. Some believed the aircraft had been hijacked by someone on board, suggesting that the sudden turn and disappearance were part of a planned action rather than an accident. Others argued that a critical mechanical failure may have occurred, causing a chain reaction of system malfunctions that led to the loss of communication and control. One of the most widely discussed theories involved the pilot, as investigators discovered unusual flight paths saved in his personal flight simulator that appeared similar to the route the aircraft had taken. This discovery led some to believe that the entire event may have been carefully planned in advance, while others insisted that such simulator data could not be used as definitive evidence of intent. Another theory suggested that the aircraft experienced a sudden loss of cabin pressure, which would have caused everyone on board, including the crew, to gradually lose consciousness. In that scenario, the plane would have continued flying on autopilot for hours until it eventually ran out of fuel and descended into the ocean. However, even this explanation failed to account for several critical details, including the precise turn and the deliberate shutdown of communication systems. Each theory provided a possible explanation for part of the story, but none of them were able to fully explain everything that had happened. As official explanations struggled to provide clear answers, more unsettling and controversial ideas began to spread among the public. Some people believed that the aircraft had not been destroyed at all, but instead had been deliberately redirected to an unknown location, somewhere far from its original path. There were rumors about hidden airstrips, remote landing zones, and operations that were never intended to be revealed to the public. While many of these ideas were dismissed as speculation, they continued to gain attention because of how little confirmed information was available. The absence of clear evidence allowed these theories to grow, filling the gaps left by unanswered questions. And then there were even more extreme interpretations of the event, ones that went beyond conventional explanations. Some suggested that the aircraft had encountered something unknown, something that could not be explained by current technology or understanding. These theories were not supported by solid evidence, but they reflected the level of uncertainty and discomfort surrounding the case. When a mystery remains unsolved for this long, people begin to consider possibilities that they would normally dismiss. And in this case, the lack of answers only made those possibilities seem more real. Even after years of investigation, there are still specific details in this case that remain deeply troubling and difficult to explain. The aircraft's communication systems did not fail all at once, but were turned off in a sequence that suggests deliberate human action rather than a sudden technical malfunction. The turn made by the aircraft was controlled, precise, and intentional, indicating that someone was actively guiding the plane during that moment. The flight path appeared to avoid areas with strong radar coverage, which raises the possibility that whoever was controlling the aircraft had knowledge of how to remain undetected. There was no distress signal, no emergency call, and no attempt to communicate with air traffic control after the initial disappearance. No demands were made, no message was sent, and no explanation was provided at any point during or after the incident. These missing pieces create a pattern that does not fully align with any single theory, leaving the case unresolved. It is a situation where every answer seems incomplete, and every explanation raises new questions instead of closing the case. Even today, the search for MH370 has not completely stopped, as new efforts continue to be proposed and developed using advanced technology. Some organizations believe that improved underwater scanning systems may eventually locate the main wreckage somewhere in the vast depths of the ocean. Others remain skeptical, arguing that the search area is simply too large and too complex to guarantee a successful outcome. There are also those who believe that the truth may already be known by certain groups, but has not been fully disclosed to the public. This belief has fueled ongoing speculation and contributed to the continued mystery surrounding the case. At the same time, many families of the passengers continue to seek answers, hoping for closure after years of uncertainty. For them, this is not just a mystery, but a personal loss that remains unresolved. Whether the aircraft is eventually found or not, the emotional impact of this event continues to be felt by those who were directly affected. A plane should not be able to disappear without a trace in a world where technology tracks nearly every movement across the sky. And yet, this aircraft did exactly that, leaving behind only fragments of information and a story that still has no clear ending. Years have passed, investigations have been conducted, and countless theories have been proposed, but the truth remains incomplete. And perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all is this: the answers may exist somewhere in the depths of the ocean, hidden beyond reach, waiting to be discovered. Or they may never be found at all, because some mysteries are not waiting to be solved. They are waiting to be forgotten. If this story left you wondering, the next one is waiting for you. Subscribe and stay with us.